Okay, to start our chocolate chip cookies, I'm not going to be using nuts because two of my friends are actually really allergic to nuts, and I'm gonna need help eating 60 cookies, so I want them to be able to eat them as well. So we're just gonna be mixing in our flour, which we use the proper method with a scoop to measure out 1.5 cups, and then our 3/4 teaspoons of salt, and our 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. And I'm just gonna use a regular old wooden spoon to just make sure that that gets mixed up really, really well before we start mixing in some of our other ingredients. Okay, for our next step, I've got our 10 tablespoons of butter shortening Crisco with the 2 tablespoons of just regular plain butter and 1 cup of sugar here. And I am going to have to cut this clip because my hands are about to get very, very dirty. But just going in with my hands like the article said. The Crisco definitely maybe I just haven't worked with like much room temperature butter, but it definitely seems much more like soft and moldable than I would typically think of as regular butter as being. So that's interesting to know. And yeah. It smells very bakery, like. Okay, now that I have mixed it with my hands and have the softest hands I will probably ever have in my entire life, I am just whisking it with a fork like the article said to do. And then I am going to mix in my egg. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I'm gonna take my egg. Broke that a little hard. And I've added that. Okay, now that I've beat my egg into my butter sugar mixture, I am going to measure out my vanilla and add that in there and start beating it. I will say when I wash my hands from mixing up the Crisco, like the butter shortening, I was trying to use warm water to get some of it off because it was really sticky, and it didn't like melt in the way that I would think that butter would. So that could be something to think about as well. It definitely got a little more, it just got thicker. It took a lot of soak, whereas I feel like if I had, maybe that's not right. I'll see with the butter, but I feel like typically with butter, like I would be able to like use some hot water and like a little bit of soap. So maybe worth noting. And now as I have that all done, I'm gonna start mixing in a little bit of the dry ingredients, and I will be back once they are all mixed in. Okay, now that's all mixed in. It's looking very fluffy, very dough-like. This looks a lot like when my mom makes Christmas cookies around the holidays. So now I've got my 1 cup of chocolate chips, no nuts, and I'm gonna continue to use my fork to mix it in. Oh my gosh, this looks exactly like regular chocolate. Wow, I'm so surprised with myself. This looks like, it just looks softer. Like it looks better than like when you use like the prepackaged dough. Maybe that's because it's like homemade. Maybe it's because it looks more like, I don't know, fluffy, soft. Maybe that's the right word. It's definitely a lighter color than like Nestle prepackaged cookie dough. So that is interesting, but it looks good. So yeah. Okay, those are all plated up on their trays. So I'm gonna put those in the oven for the 10 to 12 minutes and do some dishes while I wait for them to bake, and then we'll be moving on to the next type of butter. Okay, now just before I take the first batch of cookies out of the oven, I'm mixing my 1.5 cup of flour with my 3/4 teaspoon of salt and my 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. And I'm just gonna mix those together once again with my wooden spoon. Sorry, that was my cat jumping off of like a windowsill. So now that that's all mixed up, I am going to check on the first batch of cookies. Okay, so I just took the other cookies out of the oven and they are looking pretty good, if I do say so myself. So now we have our 12 tablespoons of just regular salted butter heading into our clean bowl, and then our 1 cup of sugar, and I'm going to start mixing this up, same as I did last time. Okay, now that that's all mixed up, I've got my egg, and I'm going to be, not as aggressive as a mix up as the last one. And as I predicted, when I was mixing the Crisco, the butter was a lot easier to come off my hands when I washed them. I'm not sure if that potentially has something to do with the fat content or something, but it definitely came off my hands with like mostly warm water, and then I just needed like a little bit of soap to get it off. Whereas like the last time, warm water was making it much worse. And then when I was mixing it, I definitely noticed that it was much softer and a lot less sticky. So it was just easier to work with, in my opinion. And the Crisco was soft and easy to work with, but it just was a little bit more messy, more of a hassle. So now I pre-portioned out my vanilla extract. So I'm gonna be adding that in next, and I will see you back for adding in the dry ingredients. Okay, so now I am back adding in my dry ingredients, little scoops at a time, just mixing them in, and definitely again, the mixture is turning to be doughy very quickly. This looks to me much more similar to like prepackaged dough, like the Nestle kind that you can buy at the store. So that could also be something worth noting. It looks also much smoother. I also haven't fully added all of the dry ingredients yet, but it looks just much smoother rather than like, I guess, like fluffy compared to the last batch that we were making with the Crisco. Okay, so now I'm just adding my cup of chocolate chips, and I definitely stand by what I said earlier. This definitely seems a lot more similar to like store-bought dough, where it's like very thick, and I feel like I'm getting in a good arm workout, beating everything together. But yet again, it is looking very good, very doughy. So this is where we're at right now, and we will be back to put them in the oven. Okay, so I have here my shortening made cookie in my left hand and my butter made cookie in my right hand. This one definitely seems a lot more like crumbly and stuff, where this one seems like a lot fluffier and softer. I definitely also found that the butter ones melted a lot quicker in the oven. I feel like I had to leave these in for a little bit longer, the shortening ones, which makes sense because butter has a lower melting point than shortening. And it also makes sense because butter has more saturated fats, and they are like able to, like the bonds in those are able to break easier, as we were talking about in class. So that all definitely makes sense with what we're learning and stuff for all of those things. But overall, it definitely looks like the butter is much more like active and more like cookie-like, whereas this one just seems like a little bit more like the store-bought like health cookies that you would buy. So definitely worth noting in both of these, but I'm excited to give them both a try and see how the taste compares. So thanks for following along.